Okay, so Adam Barken, it's fantastic to have you here for NYM Buzz, showrunner of Killjoys. But I know the show was actually created by Michelle Libretta, so how did you get involved?
Well, I started on the show right from season one. I came in as, at the time I was a consulting producer with a number of other writers like Jeremy Boxon and Emily Andrus, who's now of course created and running Winona Earp, and Aaron Martin, who's behind Slasher and a new Netflix show that's coming up. So it was a pretty great room. I was really lucky to be in there, and you know, from the get-go just completely clicked with the show, and Michelle and I got along really well. So when season 2 came back, you know, they asked me to come back as a co-executive producer, along with some other co-VPs, but to kind of work with Michelle and be there right all the way through for, production. And that worked out well. So then season 3, I came back as the sole co-VP to work with Michelle again. And, you know, by that time we were able to finish each other's sentences. And you know, we were always very much on the same page. And Michelle has a very distinctive voice as a writer and as a creator. And, you know, part of your job as a TV writer is to be able to take on somebody else's voice. But I was also lucky because I was there from the very beginning to also affect the voice in a certain way, I think. So, you know, being able to participate that way meant that when Michelle was ready to step back, I was kind of the natural person to be able to step up and take her place. But, you know, she's been intimately involved with the show since then as well. And you know, it's been having her as my lifeline has been made the show possible.
Recently she said that she's now looking at writing the finale, series finale.
She has written it.
Has it been done?
It is written, it is, yeah.
Any chance that you'll be coming back in any sort of shape or form? Have you got any plans for...
Certainly no plans right now. No, the idea was always, you know, once we came back for this final 2 seasons was to really truly wrap up the show. I know that Michelle has always talked about, hey, maybe there are books or comics in the future. And
it's sci-fi,
exactly.
You never know.
Absolutely, and I think for Michelle to do that would be a treat, and I would be, as much as any fan, super excited about what she came up with for there.
Right.
But I think for, you know, for most of us, and certainly for the TV show, as far as we can tell, this is our farewell.
Yeah.
Well, season 4 and 5 are both in, and again, as we have done before, they're in a pretty tight time frame. You know, we're a show that kind of keeps up a certain pace, and so really it takes place. Although I don't know exactly the number of days, you could really count season 4 in terms of days, in terms of how long it's taking place. And I think the same thing with season 5. I think if I were forced to guess based on something, I think what we're saying is that season 5 takes place over about 25 days.
Okay. And obviously the crux of the show is Team Awesome Force.
Absolutely.
And I like to say personally, original Team Killjoys, to include Lucy as well.
Very good.
But I wonder, you know, at the moment, the way that things are looking for them, they've all got their own sort of things going on. They're a little bit fractured. Will the team become more unified towards the end of the season, going into season 5?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as always, what we love to do with our show is we have this core group of people who everyone loves as a team, and then of course our job as dramatists is to put conflict in there so that we love to see them, you know, kind of struggle and then come back together as they always do. You know, in season 4 there have been some pretty big splits. You know, we saw the big fight between Dav and Dutch over what to do with Jack. By the end of season 4 they will certainly have come back together, but we end season 4 on this incredible cliffhanger in which everyone has forgotten who they are. So season 5 is very much about, this is all right for later, right? This stuff is...
So it's for the launch of season 5.
Perfect, yeah. So as we all know, we end season 4 with everybody, nobody remembering who they are and knowing what their real relationship with each other. And so season 5 starts with them as, in a sense, as separated as they've ever been. And part of the story is about them coming back together. But even in coming back together, there are kind of conflicts, personal issues that have now been laid bare that they have to deal with before they can finally come together as the Team Awesome Force they are, and, you know, kind of fight to save the day.
And how much will Jack be a factor in season 5?
Jack's definitely a big factor. I mean, obviously the fact that, you know, Dav and and Anila and Dulcea have had this child, and he's very important to the ladies' plan. We know that in season 4, although we don't necessarily know exactly why, and season 5 explores that. At the same time, though, we also want to make sure we stick with the idea that, we felt strongly about, and that Dav felt very strongly about, is that this was not a fight that this boy asked to be a part of. This is not a war that he asked to be a part of, and it's not right, even if he's important, to force him into doing something that he is not prepared for and maybe would not choose to be a part of. So the focus is still always on our team and Team Awesome Force, but believe me, Jack does show up and make some pretty awesome and surprising appearances.
Well, one of the things I'm wondering is whether he's going to come between Dutch and Davin, because certainly we see, Dutch is the one sort of teaching him to fight and wanting to protect him by showing him how to kill, and Dav's obviously taking the more fatherly role and wants to protect him himself. So is that going to put a sort of wedge in the works at all?
Well, I think the biggest wedge that we see between Dav and Dutch is what we've seen in season 4, in terms of what are we going to quote unquote use Jack for. Once they've kind of sorted that out, and once Jack is sent off with Dulcea, it's less about a conflict over what they're going to do or not do with Jack. The issues still have more to do with, how this trio work as a team. And actually, I would say the bigger conflict in season 5 is between Dutch and Johnny, and the aftermath of what they experience under the ladies' control and how that plays out over there. So I wouldn't say that we'd be looking for, fights over, where Jack goes to school, or, whether or not he gets to ride shotgun.
Well, I mean, speaking of Dutch, she's such a key character, but also playing at least 3 characters. Is that going to expand at all? And how did you decide on Hannah John-Kamen doing all those? Did you know from the outset, or did it sort of develop through the show that you were going to have her playing lots of different people?
Well, it definitely developed over time. We had always had certain ideas about who the villain was and looking for ways to make her interesting. When we came up with the idea of Anila, the coolest idea we thought was, what if she looks exactly like Dutch, and then how, and what does that mean, and how to explain that. I think we always felt confident, because Hannah is just such a stunning actor, that she would be able to pull off anything. I don't think we realized how well she'd do until we had our first table read in season 3, the finale, when we had the confrontation between Dutch and Anila, and we sat down in the table read, which is when all the actors get together and read it for the first time. And Hannah sat down with a scene that, awkwardly is basically an actor talking to herself, and we said, okay, we'll see. And she busted out with both of those incredibly different accents, going back and forth the entire time.
Wow.
Our jaws were on the floor. There was spontaneous applause at the end of it. And at that point we knew, well, we're perfectly fine and in very good hands.
I mean, she's amazing, and obviously she's now in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and she's been a Ready Player One, and that's all happened while she's been on Killjoys. How has that affected production for you guys? Well,
I would say, surprisingly and in the best possible way, not at all, insofar as Hannah is, if there's any type of person you want to have as your number one in the lead of a show, it's Hannah. Not only is she a professional, not only is she incredibly talented, but as I'm sure her other actors have told you, there's been no change in terms of Hannah or in us having to change anything with her. She's still the same person. She's just a delight to be with on set. She always knows everything. She does her homework. So I'm not surprised she's blowing up, because I think it simply was a matter of time for other people to see exactly what we saw from the beginning. She's a star. She's a superstar.
And one of the things I wondered is, obviously, when we first meet Dutch, she's got the British accent. Was there any discussion about changing that at all?
No. I mean, we were very lucky to be able to reach out into that casting pool. Michelle had a very, very strong image in her mind. She wanted to make sure this was a woman of color. When we were looking, there were certainly some great actors we looked at from Canada, the U.S., but, there was just something about that style that we really liked and that we thought fit. To us, the British accent is great and wonderful, and there's absolutely we get notes sometimes on people's Canadian accents.
Oh, really?
We have to dub over how people say sorry. But with Hannah, no, never. And, to be honest, with sci-fi, the Brits have been, the kings of sci-fi for so long. In a weird way,
true,
I think it makes people probably feel more comfortable to have a Brit at the head.
Yeah, makes you feel like you're doing something right.
Exactly.
And then in terms of sort of the sci-fi, I mean, Michelle Loretta is a great world builder.
Yes, she is.
And are we going to see more planets come into the galaxy, or are we going to stick with what we have at the moment?
No, we always like to explore, out beyond the quad, and so we definitely have some other planets we go to. But we also are exploring some different aspects of the system within the quad.
Right.
There's a whole kind of prison system that we're exploring, and that we have a big new location and set for.
Okay.
That is something we've never seen before. So we had a great fun kind of coming up with how that works and how it fits in. As always, we all love world building, so it's always fun every season to create something new and play with it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see the fact that you've obviously got your sets, and I believe you film around Toronto, and yet somehow make it look like different worlds. Does that have its own, I imagine, its own sort of difficulties that come with that?
Yes.
Especially if you're filming in winter.
Yes. I would say we have followed the time-honored Doctor Who tradition of shooting in a lot of quarries, because that always looks spacey when you're in a quarry, and also in industrial areas.
Yeah, the big warehouses.
Absolutely. Also, I'm a big Doctor Who fan and love watching all the different warehouses they shoot in for space stations, so we've done that. But we've also just been very lucky to have consistently, even though they've changed over time, but consistently art department teams who just kind of every year raise the bar in terms of both what they can build on sets and then, the work that they do on location to make them, look spacey. I think the biggest challenge is always doors. Human doors
Really?
Just look very earthy.
Right.
The doorknobs, and we're just so used to space doors sliding open and shut.
Yeah.
Anytime you see a regular door in any kind of spaceship, you go, that doesn't look right. That looks like an office. So spend a lot of time hiding doors.
Okay, good to know. Do you have a favourite world then?
Within the quad, I suppose, I've always actually been Westerly is where our heart is, obviously, but I've always been a big fan of Kresh. I love it anytime we can find a way to go there or to explore Kresh. I find that a really fascinating world with it's very codified. It has lots of rules, and obviously anytime we can find a really cool, it allows us to also just shoot in some big beautiful houses, which is nice because things can also get, Westerly is a pretty grim place as far as it is, and Lucian spaceships can be very dark. It's nice to be able to open up and be in opulence. Yeah,
absolutely. And in terms of talking about Kresh, are we going to see the 9 return to the fold?
Oh yes, absolutely. The 9 have always been there. They will continue to be there. And since Dulcea is still such an important, integral part of our show, she will always connect us to the 9. So, the 9 are there right up to the very, very end. But how they are and what their power structure is will definitely change. Certainly with the return of Anila Kinrit.
I mean, we obviously know that, and you've said actually before that Anila and Dulcea are actually in love, which can be difficult to know given how psychotic they wrote that. But what is that reunion going to be like then?
It's great. It's big. I mean, it's certainly a big part of season 5. They've been separated, for an entire season and more. So yes, that moment is absolutely a beautiful, beautiful moment. Between the two of them where they come together, which is a little strange to say considering they are both psychotic and some would say mass murderers, and it's always been interesting to me to see the audience and see those who still understandably are with Johnny, who will never forgive her and struggle with them, versus those who absolutely love them and have forgiven them everything they've done. And we've never wanted to tell the audience what they're supposed to feel or not feel about Dulcea. I have no problem with people saying I will never forgive Dulcea and I hate her. We have people in the crew who feel the same way, but that to me feels real in terms of our show. In that, people do things that they can certainly come to regret or learn to grow past, but that doesn't mean they are forgiven.
Good people do bad things and vice
Absolutely.
versa.
Yep.
One of the things that makes Dulcea such an interesting character is that she does seem to sort of switch between good and bad a little bit. You never know what she's thinking. And we see her soften up a bit once she gives birth. But again, and obviously, loses her Helen identity at that time. Is that going to sort of continue, or is she going to go switch back to the bad?
Well, I think it's like you said, she does go back and forth, and I think the fun about Dulcea is that there is certainly never going to be a point where we think, oh, she's just a big cuddle bear. But she's not the same person she was,
Right.
you know, when she started this show, and her experience meeting, you know, with first Dutch and then Anila has absolutely changed her. And if there's any character, and every character goes through change to a certain degree by the end of this show, I would say Dulcea's journey has been one of the broadest and one of the most fun to chart, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I imagine is probably the hardest to do is to kill people off and write them out. Would you say that's the harder part for you in terms of the writing?
Well, you hate me if I say I love doing it.
No,
but, you know,
not at all.
It's super fun to do if you can do it in an honest way that
Right.
that feels earned. You know, part of our job and joy is to make an audience feel something strongly, not to manipulate them with cheap thrills, but certainly to take them through a journey where they can feel a real sense of loss.
Yeah.
You know, we killed Potter,
Yeah.
and that was a storyline that we knew right from the very beginning. Back in season 1, Michelle was very clear about what Potter's journey was going to be, so we were able to take the time to hopefully set up the audience, you know, make them love her the way we loved her,
Right.
show her experience with Johnny, show how she grew, and then show her making a sacrifice for her home of Leith. Or of Westerly, so her new home of Westerly.
Was that the same with Alvis?
Well, with Alvis, it was certainly a case of we knew that Anila coming was going to have a cost. And so there was certainly a few names on the chopping block in terms of, okay, who would be the person? And when we just kind of looked at the totality of season 3 and saw where Alvis had been back in season 2 and in this one, and how much we had built up the rivalry between when we finally revealed that the Scarbacks really were created in response to Anila, and that she was the devil. It just felt like absolutely right that if she was going to come back and kill anybody, it would be the guy who's heading up a group that considers her the devil. What better way for the devil to make her appearance than to kill her greatest enemy? So, and also somebody who had an emotional connection with Dutch. She would really feel it, and that unfortunately, but yes, that our audience would feel the shock and surprise and understand that Anila was absolutely not playing, was playing for keeps.
I mean, it's interesting at the moment, you know, going into sort of the end of season 4, how Anila and Dutch are working together. Is the focus going to be, you know, get the lady, that war is all? Or are there going to be other sort of wars or even warrants in season 5?
Right. No, the warrant system right now is absolutely dead. By the end of season 4, we've blown up the rack. You know, the war is all for sure. So it is very much focused on the lady. You know, season 4 is about us trying to figure out what the lady is up to, and also it's really a story of the lady, how she figures a way to get out of the green. Now that she's done that, season 5 is, okay, now that she's out and messing around with everything, how do we stop her? So the show very much focuses on that and on that battle, and that's really what drives it.
And Klein's memory breadcrumb trail,
yes,
is that going to carry on into season 5?
No, season 4, that was really for us the engine of season 4, laying it in and then discovering it in episode 5, and then the episode from episodes 5 onwards, it's about discovering what is that breadcrumb trail, and of course, you know, discovering the fact that it leads to, you know, Anila's mother, and finding out the source of the green, and discovering that there is a weapon to destroy it, but that it comes with a great cost. All of that stuff will really be played out by the end of season 4. You know, we have done a long, really seasons 1 through 4 always had Klein in a way as a bit of a prime mover, guiding Dutch, giving her clues. Season 5, he isn't that. Season 5 finds Klein in a very different position, subservient to the lady, trying to figure out a way to get away to possibly save Dutch and Yella, or is he? So really the work that our team have to do is they have to figure it out on their own. There are no breadcrumb trails anymore. There is only themselves and their own wits with them that they have to use.
Okay. And in terms of the other characters, because we saw Zeph taking a bigger part, Pip as well this season, and even Pre kind of coming into the fold as a killjoy, really. Are those characters going to play a bigger part in season 5?
Absolutely. I mean, from season 3 on, obviously, we were building up that kind of what we called in season 4 the quad squad, the people who are going to stay behind while our guys are running around, and that becomes even more of an issue in season 5 because once Dutch, Dav, and Johnny have figured out who they are, there's still an entire world and city in Old Town that doesn't know, and we have to tell that story of how they slowly but surely wake up, and that is something that Zeph and Pre and even Turin and Fancy and all of those people who we've grown to really love are a part of, and they're part of the absolute joy of working on this show are all those characters who stepped up, like Pre and Garrett, which became, surprisingly to us as we wrote it, but then more and more, kind of one of our favorite couples. And exploring their relationship has been like one of the joys of the show.
Well, I've loved watching Garrett and seeing him come back. I know that he was a character that initially you were only expecting to be around for, I believe, like one episode and sort of wrote in. Are there many other characters where you sort of thought they'll be in for one episode and you carried them on?
Definitely. Pip was I'd say, a big one. Atticus Mitchell came in. He was written as a really funny, great one-off character. We've done those before. But when he came in, he was just such an absolute breath of fresh air. He was just so funny that we immediately thought, oh, we have to bring him back. And that happens, you know. Season 5, we found that out with another couple of characters who appear kind of in the middle of the season, and then we just loved them so much that we said we have to find a way to bring them back for the finale. So, you know, one of the joys of doing television, and one of the cool things about doing TV when you're also seeing it on the air, is you can really see how things pop, how people react to stuff. So that happens, you know, a lot. And actors who on the day just surprise us are obviously the people who then we would love to just keep writing for.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you have a lot of stuff going on for season 5, and I know that you know essentially where the ending is going. But for our sort of individual Team Awesome Force characters, do you want the happy ending or the blaze of glory for them personally?
I mean, I'm of the opinion that every show sets its own tone, and therefore what you have to do is honor that tone. You know, Breaking Bad was always a show about a man about to die. It made sense for him to die at the end. Ours is a show that is very much in the vein of there's always one more adventure. There's always one more star system to go to. Our guys, while certainly willing to risk their lives all the time, win. That's the joy of our show, and I think we all in this world today see enough stories that end with, oh, and then everyone's dead. Killjoys is a show that always promises there's more adventure, so that is what we want. Well,
in terms of more adventure, if you could spin off one of those characters, which one would it be?
Well, I think based on the audience reaction, I don't disagree with them, a great cop or detective show involving Pre, Garrett, and possibly Fancy seems like it would be pretty great. And
that would be amazing.
I would absolutely love to do an 80s style sci-fi cop show with Pre, Garrett, and Fancy in their own kind of old town detective agency going about and having to fight crime and solve mysteries. I could write that all day.
Like an 80s westerly sort of.
It would just be an absolute dream. I think those guys, who wouldn't want to watch that?
You must have some favourite lines. I mean, there's some that really stick out to me, especially for Pre, but you must have some favourite lines that you've written, that you've seen on the screen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I'll be honest, almost all my favourite lines are Michelle's. Michelle is just the absolute best at those. You know, me personally, and it's hard to kind of think right off the top of my head about lines. You kind of think more in terms of scenes and moments, you know. I think for me, one that I always really enjoyed was back in season 2 when Johnny had to go to Potter's homeworld and have that dinner with her family. It was so much fun to write just all that goofy ritualistic stuff, and then to see Johnny stumbling along trying to figure out how to do it. I just thought that was I always thought that was a lot of fun. And then, you have characters like Pri who are always a joy to write and who always come up with, but who honestly at the same time also always come up with their own lines sometimes and can come up with some great stuff that, you absolutely kills. So.
And finally, if you were going to cross over Killjoys with any other sci-fi show, what would you choose?
That's a great question. I mean, who wouldn't want to run into the Doctor? Of course. And it feels like that is, in a sense, the most believable one, because why couldn't he stumble his way into the Killjoys universe? We don't know if it's set thousands of years in the future or the past and where it is. And I think that the Doctor would be quite chuffed with Dutch, and I think he'd find her a kindred spirit. And I think the four of them with Zeph and with Lucy, I think would be great. And I think Lucy and the TARDIS would get along famously. That's
true. That would be a good match.
I think so. I think that'd be great.
We'd have to have a new ship name for that.
Oh, I love it. I think that'd be so much fun.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
My pleasure.
It's been fantastic watching the show.
Thank you.
Good luck with season 5 and with the rest of shooting.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks for coming, and thanks to the fans. They're an incredible group of people, and they're such a joy to write for and to hang out with on Twitter. And so we just really hope everybody enjoys how we end it.
Brilliant. Can't wait to see it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.